The picnic started with the ordinary sounds of a Pennsylvania summer. Cicadas building in the heat, a father kicking dust off a roadside blanket, a mother unpacking wax paper sandwiches, children slipping toward the great jumble of rocks the maps call Devil's Den. Late afternoon light slid across the boulders and made the cracks look deeper than they were. A boy stepped between two slabs the size of freight cars, laughing, still in sight, his hand closing around a paper cup as if to fill it from the stream that braided below the rocks. The mother told him not to stray. He nodded without looking back and took 2 small steps down into shadow. At first they called his name the way parents do, sing-song, expectant, believing he would pop out from behind a rock with grass on his knees and a grin like nothing had happened. Minutes stretched. The calls sharpened. Shoes scraped across granite. The father slid into a crevice and tore his palms coming back out. Another family on the slope paused their own meal and joined in, then a couple from town, then a uniformed guide who knew the trails by habit and history. The guide ran to the road and telephoned the ranger station from a farmhouse. Dusk dropped fast in the hollows between the boulders. Rangers arrived with carbide lamps and a coil of rope. They went feet first into fissures that smelled of damp leaves and old iron, tapping with poles, listening for a voice. The stream, Plum Run, was dragged in short, methodical sweeps while others fanned the oak stands with whistles. The parents held each other, hopeful enough to flinch at every shout, sick enough to keep scanning the same 3 places over and over, as if willpower could change the ground. Night turned the battlefield into a maze. Volunteers gathered at the ranger station, men from garages and orchards, women who boiled coffee and packed baskets. The search grid formed by lantern light, north along Sickles Avenue, south beneath Little Round Top, west toward the farm lanes. They marked rock lips with chalk so they could tell which crevices had already been checked. A deputy brought a dog. On the exposed stone, the scent died in swirls of hot air. Near the stream, the dog pawed at the bank, sneezed, and lay down. Morning came with the thud of boots and the rattle of canteens. State police took command and asked everyone to move in lines, shoulder to shoulder, eyes on the ground. A child could wedge into a space smaller than a grown man's arm. They probed sinkholes with bayonet-length rods borrowed from a National Guard armory. The rods clicked against stone and sank into soft leaf beds. Each time the metal found a void, several men would get down and reach in past briars, feeling for cloth, for skin, for anything that might be found by touch before it was seen. News reached the county by noon. A paper ran a short column, boy missing at the den, last seen in dark shorts near the stream, and asked anyone who had been there to call. Drivers slowed on Emmitsburg Road to stare at the cluster of cars at the trailhead. Children pressed faces to windows and watched adults moving ant-like among the rocks. In town, shopkeepers taped the column to their glass. That night, church bells tolled before a prayer vigil. Day 2 brought more structure and more dread. They measured the distance a child might cover in an hour, then doubled it for the maze, then tripled it for panic. That radius enclosed orchards, hedgerows, shallow ravines, and fences where a small shirt could catch. Searchers moved in pairs, trading off the worst places, the tight cracks that scraped ribs, the undercuts where a slip could mean a broken leg and a second rescue. Heat pressed down. A thunderstorm spilled over the ridge and left the rocks slick, and the air tensed with the smell of wet lichen. After the rain, they checked the margins again for fresh prints. The stone took none. By the 3rd day, the search turned methodical to the point of ritual. A surveyor from the park sketched the rock field to scale and numbered the clefts. Crews marked each with a flagged cord, then called out the numbers as they cleared them. A telephone tree reached fire halls in neighboring counties. A unit of Civilian Conservation Corps boys hiked in with canvas stretchers. They cut poles to span the wider cracks and used them as makeshift bridges so they could peer down safely with mirrors and lamps. Divers worked the slow pools and undercuts of Plum Run, then radioed up that the water offered nothing but silt and branches. Investigators interviewed witnesses in a classroom at the visitor center. One girl, a little older than the missing child, said she saw him step into the hollow between two stones and keep going like steps. Another remembered a bird bursting from a bush and everyone turning to look. A man who had been photographing the view said he noticed the mother's hands freeze above a tin of apples. Nothing contradicted anything else, and nothing provided the single detail that changes a search. Rumors came and went. Someone said a car sped off on Crawford Avenue, but no one could give a make, and the dust there was rutted by dozens of tires. Someone else said a stranger had been asking children their names near the monuments that morning. The description matched half the men on the field that day: hat, rolled sleeves, Sunday slacks. Rangers wrote it down anyway and checked boarding houses. They found visitors from Philadelphia, Baltimore, and a machinist on leave who had come up from the base to see the ground where his grandfather fought. No one carried so much as a scrap of a child's clothing. Days bled together. Food ran low at the staging table and still more plates appeared. Boys on bicycles carried messages between search lines and the command post. At night, when the lamps were turned down and quiet settled, a few of the men admitted they hated the sound of the stream now, the constant small noise that could smother a voice. The fourth night, a line of men stayed posted through the dark, hoping silence would draw a call for help. Nothing answered but owls. By the end of the week, the search area stretched beyond the stone field through farm plots to the south. Footprints emerged and vanished in dust that would not hold them. The state police captain stood with a map folded like an accordion and made the strangest announcement of all. They had covered everything a child could reasonably reach on foot. The word reasonably stung. The family refused to leave. Rangers let them sleep at the station and opened the doors at dawn. After 10 days, the formal search ended. A skeleton crew kept walking the rock field at first light and dusk. Road crews were told to watch for scraps of clothing snagged in brush. In the months that followed, hunters and hikers checked crevices because they could not help themselves. In winter, when snow tucked into the cracks like plaster, rangers walked the den again, looking for any place where the white lay odd or slumped into a seam. Spring came, and the story was told to new hires not as folklore, but as procedure: how to set a grid, how to number the clefts, how to keep families close without letting them get hurt. What remained was a timeline with no end. The first call, the first drag of the stream, the first grid line over Oak Duff, the chalked numbers erased by rain, the dogs circling and lying down, the divers surfacing and shaking their heads, the cup still dented from a child's hand. It is a record like any other. A picnic in 1941 on open ground visited by hundreds every day, and a child who stepped into shadow and did not return. The names of the searchers fill notebooks. The absence fills the place. Some years later, a ranger retiring after decades on the field gave the parents the only thing he could think to give: the small chalkboard they had used to tally cleared crevices. He said they had run out of numbers and started over 3 times. They held it like a memorial. The father thanked him for not quitting. The mother put the chalkboard away and kept the cup. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories, if you dare.